evening, I'm Wendy Mesley, and this is The National. As more and more asylum seekers sneak into Canada, a Regina woman is charged with human smuggling. Canada's dairy dilemma. We explain the system that angers so many countries, what it gets you and what it costs you.
Fire Bill O'Reilly!
Fox News cuts loose its biggest star. Plus, as BC drug deaths escalate, we show you how Portugal turned the tide. The number of people intercepted by the Mounties while crossing the border rose dramatically last month. Nearly 1,900 asylum seekers made the journey to Canada in March, more than double the attempts in February. But today, the focus of the RCMP was on one specific border trip. They charged a Saskatchewan woman with human smuggling. Cameron McIntosh has the details.
North Portal, Saskatchewan. As far as border crossings go, this one is pretty quiet. But on Friday night, the first real glimpse into how Canadian and American authorities are tracking how some asylum seekers are crossing the border.
The CBSA uncovered evidence to suggest suspected smugglers were allegedly bringing foreign nationals into Canada.
Authorities say one of their suspects was flagged crossing alone into the U.S. An hour later,
the RCMP intercepted a female Canadian resident who was driving north of the border in Canada. In her vehicle were 9 foreign nationals who failed to report to the CBSA upon entering Canada.
The vehicle's driver, 43-year-old Michelle Omarui, faces 2 human smuggling-related charges. She's declined comment in what police allege was a for-profit enterprise.
If there's humanitarian reasons for aiding or facilitating smuggling, then generally, no, there would not be charges.
American officials also made arrests. The investigation continues. Refugee advocates say this is likely not isolated.
The reality around the world is that many times refugees do have to depend upon smugglers to help them get across the barriers that are put up.
The 9 people who crossed the border have not been charged. They qualify to make asylum claims under the Refugee Act. In recent months, the number of asylum seekers has been going up. New numbers for March show what many expected. A sharp increase in numbers of interceptions at the border by RCMP, almost doubling since January 1st to nearly 2,000 people. Quebec and Manitoba have the highest numbers. While some are being detained by border services, most are being allowed into the country to make a refugee claim. These asylum seekers arrived in Manitoba in January, fleeing violence in Djibouti. Whether they get to stay is unclear. They're all waiting for refugee board hearings.
I want to get here freedom and health here too. This is what I'm asking Canada government.
Today, the Office for the Public Safety Minister said it's monitoring the increased numbers and is confident in the RCMP and Canada Border Services Agency. It would not offer a comment, however, on the arrest, saying that's a matter for the courts. Cameron McIntosh, CBC News, Winnipeg.
The government was speaking out today about Donald Trump's surprising attack against Canada's dairy industry. Liberal MP Wayne Easter says Trump clearly doesn't understand Canadian dairy policy. He says the U.S. created its own problems through overproduction and that trying to break Canada's supply management is not the answer.
Canada allows much more production into our country, many more dairy products into our country, about 10% of our total market in terms of dairy, whereas the United States is a much more closed market. It only allows 3% of their total market in dairy products into their country.
Easter says Canada is standing on pretty solid ground, but not everyone agrees. Supply management is a contentious issue in Canada too, not to mention a complicated one for the uninitiated. We asked Alison Northcott to walk us through how it works and how it affects consumers.
Timothy Keenan's family has been in the dairy business since the 1840s. He says Canada's supply management system helps keep his farm afloat.
Supply management gives myself and my family the ability to make a living at the farm, to keep this as a family farm.
Supply management has been a key part of Canada's dairy industry since the 1970s. It aims to match supply with demand, controlling how much dairy and some other agricultural products are produced, and it imposes stiff tariffs of up to 300% on dairy imports.
It offers stability in terms of supply. It offers quite fair prices for dairy product. It offers a fair revenue to producers too.
But it's long been a contentious system, seen by some as a protectionist policy that drives up prices for consumers.
It also reduces the competitiveness of our own industry through this protection. If we had a market system instead and we exported more, these would be more efficient operations, and we would benefit from more trade and lower prices.
Because in Canada, some very unfair things have happened to our dairy farmers.
Donald Trump made his comments about the Canadian dairy industry in Wisconsin, where dairy farmers have been embroiled in a trade dispute with Canada over what's called ultra-filtered milk. It's an ingredient used in cheese that U.S. producers can sell in Canada without a tariff. But producers here recently lowered the price of some of their milk ingredients to offset that competition, delivering a major blow to some American farmers who accuse Canada of unfair practices. Now, with the U.S. president threatening to get tough on trade, some say Canada could have to make some concessions on supply management.
This has got to be on the table. How much we give, I'm not sure. And I'm in favor of giving, at least over time.
Canada's system has survived many hurdles before, including a challenge at the World Trade Organization. That's something it could face again, with renewed criticism from industry leaders in Australia and New Zealand adding to the complaints from the U.S. Alison Northcott, CBC News, Montreal.
Coming up, Earth survives a cosmic close call. But what if the next one were coming right at us? Bob McDonald may or may not ease your mind. Plus, you get a close-up look as captured ISIS soldiers are interrogated. If cable news success can be measured by the size of an audience, in the U.S., Bill O'Reilly was the undisputed king, the star of Fox News' primetime lineup for 2 decades. His opinion-laced coverage shaped the way millions of Americans saw the world. Today, he is off the air, ousted due to sexual harassment allegations. Lindsay Duncombe has more.
On the day he lost his job over sexual harassment allegations, Bill O'Reilly, superstar of the religious right, met the Pope.
Hi, I'm Bill O'Reilly.
As falls from grace go, this one's almost biblical. The top-rated anchor at the #1 cable network in the U.S. out with a one-line statement from Fox. After a thorough and careful review of the allegations, the company and Bill O'Reilly have agreed that Bill O'Reilly will not be returning to the Fox News channel, it said. Earlier this month, the New York Times revealed 5 women received millions in settlements from Fox after accusing O'Reilly of sexual harassment or inappropriate behavior.
I received an email from Mr. O'Reilly's assistant.
After the original story was published, Canadian-born relationship guru and radio host Wendy Walsh made similar accusations against O'Reilly.
I'm here for the future of my daughters and all the daughters of America who are entering the workforce in droves, and I want them to have a safe, non-toxic work environment.
More than 50 advertisers pulled out of the show, but the audience didn't. Even the president seemed to support the host, telling the New York Times, quote, he didn't think Bill did anything wrong. One of the criticisms of Fox is that it tolerated a culture of harassment, not just from O'Reilly, but from former boss Roger Ailes, too. The founder and former CEO of Fox News lost his job over sexual harassment allegations last summer. Women's advocates say holding accountable these men at this network under this administration sends a message.
I totally understand why women are celebrating this as a victory today. I am celebrating it as a victory as well. But I think we have to ask, what about the women being harassed who don't have advertising dollars for their bosses to lose?
Tonight, in a statement, Bill O'Reilly called the accusations completely unfounded and wished his former employer the best. He did not disclose the terms of his departure. His former boss, Roger Ailes, left the network with a $40 million settlement. Lindsay Duncombe, CBC News, Washington.
British Prime Minister Theresa May turned to Parliament today to vote on her decision to launch the country into a general election. Westminster obliged in typically rowdy fashion.
Order! Order!
The yes vote for an early election was overwhelming. May says the election will strengthen Britain's hand in Brexit negotiations with Europe. The Labour opposition trails badly in polls. Its leader, Jeremy Corbyn, considered unpopular. After video showing a murder was posted to Facebook and viewed by people around the world for hours before being removed, there are calls for the social media giant to do a better job filtering content. But with Facebook launching a new barrage of features, some say that policing job is about to get much more difficult. Kim Brunhuber has that.
The future of Facebook. Soon we'll be able to turn ourselves into cartoons and meet up with distant buddies in virtual reality. But Facebook still hasn't mastered its own actual reality. This year's annual developer conference was overshadowed by tragedy. The murder of Robert Godwin, posted to its site by Steve Stevens.
We will keep doing all we can to prevent tragedies like this from happening.
Facebook's CEO briefly addressed the issue in his keynote speech, but many in the audience weren't persuaded something like this won't happen again. For the most part, Facebook relies on its users to report offensive posts, which are then reviewed by paid staff or by contractors in foreign countries. But according to a professor who studies online content moderating, there just aren't enough people to monitor Facebook's close to 2 billion users.
Reviewing content and making decisions about it is more often than not a game of catch as catch can.
According to Zuckerberg, 1/3 of the incidents involving objectionable posts are flagged not by humans, but by an algorithm. Leaps in technology have made the company's filtering artificial intelligence smarter, but it's far from perfect. It missed the Stevens post, but censored an iconic photo from the Vietnam War. And the job of determining what to filter is only going to get more difficult as Facebook adds more complex features.
It does make it harder to make the adaptations of the algorithms into actual practice because there's more data, inevitably more data, more variables, more time needed to process the information.
Some critics say Facebook should spend more effort on that instead of, say, animating your breakfast.
Facebook has all these incredible tools to figure out what you're posting and what's in your photos, yet they're unwilling to take the same steps with the same technology to make it so that you can't post these objectionable things.
In other words, he says, if Facebook is going to develop new, exciting ways to share our lives, it has a responsibility to create more ways to stop us from sharing, too. Kim Brunhuber, CBC News, San Jose, California.
2 major studies published today suggest taking antidepressants during pregnancy does not increase the risk of autism or ADHD in the child, as previously suspected. One followed 1.5 million children born in Sweden between 1996 and 2012. The other, nearly 36,000 children born in Canada between 2002 and 2010. Both teams compared children exposed to antidepressants in utero, primarily serotonin reuptake inhibitors, to their unexposed siblings. And both concluded there was no increased risk among the exposed children for autism or ADHD. In the world of food trends, probiotics have been right up there with the likes of kale and quinoa. The health benefits are real, but in the vast sea of colorful containers, new research has determined not all probiotics are created equal. And if you think you're getting added benefits from probiotics, the findings may disappoint you. Christine Barak explains.
So how hard is it to pick a yogurt?
Well, it's increasingly difficult.
You've probably heard probiotics improve digestive health, but more specifically, if you want this yogurt to reduce gas, stomach rumbling, or reduce the symptoms of irritable bowel syndrome, researchers say be prepared to eat between 8 and 25 of these a day. Using the food industry's own studies, researchers set out to determine which probiotics were helpful and at what dose. For example, the strain in this one can help with cough and cold symptoms, reducing sick days for kids. But they'll need 20 servings a day, or just 1 to 3 of this yogurt drink, because it has 10 times more probiotics per serving.
One of these brands, this would be more attainable, with another one would be less attainable, but this information is not conveyed on the label.
Year after year, the yogurt section just keeps growing, and probiotics are now a major player. Yes, the microorganisms are good for your gut, but how much, which strain, what ingredients isn't as easy to break down.
This one has it, probiotic.
So we asked a registered dietitian to help us digest this good bacteria. For starters, if the label says probiotics,
that means it has at least 1 billion units of probiotics, so it will provide some gut health benefits.
Also look for live and active cultures. The billions more, the better. Avoid yogurt that says heated after culturing. The process kills good bacteria. Look for fewer ingredients. You only need about 3 or 4. And watch for added sugar and artificial sweeteners.
Some yogurts can be the equivalent of having a cup of soda. So you definitely want to make sure that you're taking a look at that ingredients list.
The study does suggest that this snack fights cavities and helps decrease diarrhea after antibiotic use. In drink form, kefir is a great source of probiotics. If you don't like yogurt, there's also fermented cabbage or kimchi. It just doesn't always come in a convenient cup. Christine Burak, CBC News, Toronto.
Straight ahead, asteroids up above, when they should really scare you.
Tonight on The National, East Germany throws open its borders to the West.
Future generations may very well point to this night and say, that was the night the Cold War really ended.
West Germans have climbed up in a section of the wall. They're standing about 10 deep, looking over on the other side at soldiers on the other side. They're cheering, they're taking photographs, they're popping champagne corks. It's a party scene that's going to go on the whole evening.
It seemed like all of East Berlin took the day off work to go and see how the other half lives. From morning till night, they streamed through the checkpoints into the western sector. 24 hours ago, heavily guarded, now wide open. All were given a rousing welcome.
For East Berliners by the thousands, this was their first heady taste of true freedom. The tears of joy mingled with looks of disbelief, as though the enormity of the moment was so overwhelming, they weren't really sure what to make of it all.
In sections big and small, the Berlin Wall is coming down. To those watching, it was a history-making act of demolition. Some German adults who remember Berlin before the wall found the experience emotionally wrenching. As a student, this East German was taught that the wall was meant to keep out evil capitalists. Today, he came to watch people punch holes in it.
I wanted to see all with my own eyes, and now I saw it, and it's fantastic.
Good evening from West Berlin. I'm Peter Mansbridge. That's the Brandenburg Gate.
Visitors from the east who poured in through the historic Potsdamer Platz received a welcome that brought many to tears. It seemed fitting that Western police and Eastern soldiers should link arms to hold back the cheering crowds. On the ground, a performing bear joined the party.
The wall openings are becoming a daily tradition here now, as East and West agree there have to be more routes to handle the tens of thousands of East Berliners who are crossing every hour. The vast majority just coming to take a look, do a little shopping, and then head back. And East German soldiers who used to look pretty stone-faced now look pretty tame with their flowers and smiles. The Germany of tomorrow is being shaped today in this Berlin autumn unlike any we've ever seen.
This might look like slow motion video of a peanut being tossed through the air, but you definitely don't want to eat this. It's an asteroid more than 1 kilometer across. Today, by astronomical standards, it narrowly missed the Earth. The asteroid has been nicknamed the Rock. It was discovered 3 years ago, and it's been tracked ever since. Also watching out for the Rock and other rocks like it, the host of CBC Radio's Quirks and Quarks, Bob McDonald. He joins us now. So, Bob, there's asteroids floating around in the solar system all the time. Why is this one special?
Well, this one's got our attention, Wendy, because it's a little bit bigger at, more than 1 kilometer across. And it's a reminder that there are a lot of them out there. I have some animation that'll show you just how close this thing came to us. It was more than 1 million kilometers away, which is beyond the orbit of the moon. To our standards, that's a long way, but astronomically, it's a very, very close shave. And there are others out there that are warm, running around. There are millions of them out there running around our solar system, and we haven't seen all of them yet. This particular one, as you say, looks like a peanut. Had it hit the Earth, it would have done a lot of damage. To give you a sense of scale, I have some other footage here of one that hit Russia just a couple of years ago. It came down in Chelyabinsk. That was only 10 meters across. It exploded in the atmosphere. It broke windows. It did damage to buildings, and some people were hurt by that. This one is 1,200 kilometers across. If it hit us, it would take out Toronto, Montreal, and Ottawa all at one time. Serious issue.
So if a rock like this was on a direct collision course, what could we do to stop it?
We got to do two things, and neither one of them we're doing. One, have telescopes to identify the ones that are coming towards us, and two, send a rocket out to meet it and try to nudge it out of the way. Those technologies do not exist at the moment. It's something we got to take care of because there are more of them coming.
Thanks so much, Bob. Bob McDonald. And for hazardous flying objects, you don't have to go as far as space. An Air Canada Express flight crew was reminded of that on approach to the Ottawa airport.
Tower, we just have to avoid a drone here on the final, just past our left wing.
That's a bit of the conversation with air traffic control yesterday. The crew said the drone passed by the left wing when the plane was about 5 kilometers from the runway. Operating one that close to an airport is prohibited and dangerous.
Basically a crash. It could crash a plane. The plane is on either takeoff or on landing, so there's very few space to avoid.
The federal government announced new regulations on drones a month ago. Breaking those rules means a fine of up to $3,000. For days, media around the world, including this program, reported that a U.S. carrier group was headed toward North Korea. The U.S. president tweeted he was sending a, quote, armada. Now, senior officials admit that the ships were heading in the other direction and won't be near the Korean peninsula until the end of the month. That's raised questions about credibility at a time when mistaken signals can lead to war. But in North Korea itself, no government message can be trusted, and people seem to march calmly and confidently to the drumbeat of nuclear brinkmanship. It's a world Sasha Petrusik saw firsthand with the help of government minders.
Deep under Pyongyang, people pour out of the subway. They look bored or weary, but there's no sign of panic. Under the gaze of their so-called dear leaders, previous rulers of North Korea in the Kim dynasty, in huge murals, it's clear the party line has been learned. U.S. imperialists may try to crush us, says Lee Se-hee, but the revolution will prevail, and North and South Korea will unite under our current leader, Kim Jong-un. Children practice their instruments after school. Families swim as they do every Sunday. It's almost as if no one is threatening a nuclear war here. And yet, on the parade ground, that's exactly what one of Kim Jong-un's top advisors predicts, almost poetically. It's the joyful sound of a hydrogen bomb exploding, he says, made by the strongest nuclear power in the East. The one with all these missiles on display, including new ones for submarines, big ones that could be intercontinental ballistic missiles to strike the U.S. as threatened. Tens of thousands of followers pay emotional tribute to the leader. Our dear leader provides for us, says Ryu Seung-hee. We believe him when he says we need to build strong weapons to be the envy of the world. So why is Kim Jong-un so determined to have nuclear weapons? Nuclear capability is even written into the North Korean constitution. Well, many North Koreans will tell you they've seen what happens to countries that don't have nuclear weapons or weapons of mass destruction. Libya, Afghanistan, Iraq. In each of these cases, the Americans invaded and then changed the regime. This country doesn't want to see that happen here. Even at a flower show, no arrangement is complete without the model missile, which has almost become North Korea's national symbol. Look, it's working, says Kim Young-wook. My daughter, she lives in peace, and the Americans are in retreat, while North Korea feels like it's steaming ahead. Ask about concessions or negotiations, and they actually laugh. Their faith, they say, is in their leaders and their weapons. Sasha Petrusek, CBC News, Pyongyang.
Overdose fatalities rise again in BC. Coming up, how Portugal cut its death toll.
They sent a strong message to everybody that this is first and foremost a health and social issue.
We'll show you where they spent money and how it paid off. Plus, we talk to captured ISIS fighters. A lot of them tell the same story.
We just gave the blah blah.
This is Roger Tétrault. He's a Montreal bill collector. That's his job. He also holds news conferences. That's his hobby. Here's Tétrault 3 years ago, posing as the president of a fictional group called Water Aid for America, urging that Canada ship its water to the drought-stricken U.S. The national media gobbled it up.
Here is the CBC News. A group of Montreal residents wants to pressure the Canadian government into diverting water from the Great Lakes into the Mississippi River.
The French language network of the CBC believed Tétrault was also a nuclear expert. Here he is telling a national audience how the Chernobyl disaster could rain down assorted horrors on North Americans. The now defunct Montreal Daily News had him under another name, Tubal Cain, and yet another vocation. It's been going on for years. In 1971, the Montreal Star thought it had a scoop, an internal CIA memo outlining covert operations in Quebec. It even made the National on CBC.
Under a CIA letterhead, the document reads, Subject, Quebec.
It was Tétrault's work, of course. Around the same time, he suckered the Toronto Star Weekly with a phony FLQ terrorist camp in the Laurentian Hills.
I told myself, if they want fiction, I'll give them fiction. So I gave them fiction.
Tétrault says there are many others like him, only nowadays they're known as media consultants and spin doctors.
Whoever's got an axe to grind, they give their spin to it and they get into the media, and that's the story that goes out.
He's absolutely right. Governments, anybody who's covered governments or followed things they do, know that they engage in this, where you want to call them trial balloons or disinformation, they do it frequently.
Is Tétrault's career as a hoaxer over? Perhaps, but he says he'll certainly keep trying, guided by the firm belief that there's a reporter born every minute.
He mouthed two words, the first word of which started with F and the second word of which started with O.
Well, it's a lie, because I didn't say anything.
Did you mouth it?
What does mouth mean?
Move your lips.
Yes, I move my lips.
In the words you've been quoted as saying?
No.
Did you intend to convey that?
What were you thinking when you moved your lips?
What is the nature of your thoughts, gentlemen, when you say fuddle-duddle or something like that? God, you...
Well, the big topic on Parliament Hill today wasn't the Constitution, it wasn't the economy, it was the Prime Minister and his language.
I heard him say very clearly, f***ing bastard.
I convey to the Speaker my regrets for any inconvenience, and I convey to any honourable member of the House my regrets to them.
Just quieten down, baby.
Liberal Sheila Copps didn't think the remark was very funny.
I'm not his baby, and I'm nobody's baby, and I'd like him to withdraw those remarks.
The House is no stranger to heated exchanges, but few have been this heated or this strange.
For shame. Now, I hear the word racist from that side. Do you have the fortitude or the gonads to stand up and come across here and say that to me, you son of a bitch? Come on.
Daryl.
Harder.
Order.
You want me to take over?
Yes.
Stinson came within 3 meters of Liberal John Canis before returning to his seat.
It was too much for one Liberal MP.
I did not say fuddle-duddle. That was another generation.
I think that we've reached a point where this type of conduct, it's not only disgraceful, but it's unacceptable.
There's a grim new tally from BC's losing battle against drugs. In March, 120 people died from an overdose. That's up from the previous month and way up from March of last year. Some time ago, Portugal faced a similar crisis and it gambled on a radical solution. Tonight, judge the results for yourself. Here's Chris Brown with Portugal's fix.
Equipas e vão ter que trabalhar como equipa.
In Lisbon, some of Portugal's most damaged, dependent people are trying to put their lives back together.
Deixem a corda e vir.
One step at a time.
E agora é que corre, apanha a corda e salta.
This is a physiotherapy class for heroin and cocaine users, where they relearn basic skills, like skipping, as part of their rehabilitation.
Agora tente lá passar assim só por cima de si, a corda. Primeiro só por cima de si. Não vai nada, vai conseguir pelo menos uma vez.
And statistically, there's a far greater chance they'll recover here than almost any other place in the world. That's because in Portugal, drug addiction rarely kills anyone.
Não, ele é canhão, é verdade.
People arrive here and they are wounded.
Psychologist Sandra Simões oversees programs at the Typus Rehab Clinic, programs that help people rediscover joy in small things and learn to love their bodies again.
We deal with them in a new way. We build new relationships with them, and that is very important.
In all of Portugal, fewer than 30 people a year now die from drug overdoses. In British Columbia alone, hundreds die every year, and the province has struggled for decades to save lives. In 2016, after the lethal opioid fentanyl turned up, there were more than 900 deaths, creating a public health emergency and a new urgency for solutions. Arguably, no place in the world has had as much success dealing with addictions and overdoses as Portugal. Its system emphasizes harm reduction, treatment, and rehabilitation. And at the center of it is the idea that drug use is a health problem, not a crime. All drugs here, from marijuana to heroin, have been decriminalized. Drug traffickers are still hunted down and prosecuted, but if you're caught using, you won't be sent to jail or get a criminal record or even end up in the justice system. Instead, you might have to appear before Nuno Capes.
Bruno, pode sentar aqui deste lado, só favor. Ora, 2,53 gramas de haxixe, certo?
He heads up what's known as Lisbon's Dissuasion Commission. We were allowed to sit in on one of its sessions. There are no suit or ties here, no gavels or gowns, just a sociologist in a sweater. This isn't a court, and Capes says he's not a judge.
When I wake up in the morning and come back to work, I'm not thinking on how many fines I'm going to apply or how many people I'm going to threaten to make them stop using any illicit substances. So it's fairly easy for us to focus on health issues and what help we can provide people in terms of those issues.
Portugal's Dissuasion Commission is essentially a form of state-mandated early intervention.
Bruno, vou ter que lhe repetir algumas perguntinhas, só que a Margarida já lhe...
On our visit, Capes had a meeting with a young man named Bruno, who'd been caught with some hashish.
Então, nesta altura, quando foi apanhado, com que regularidade é que costumava consumir?
Fumava cerca de 4 ganzas por dia.
Por dia, regularmente?
The punishment for him was simply a warning, along with an offer of information about treatment programs. Capes estimates 1 in 10 people who appear here have a serious drug problem, and for them, this visit can be the first step in getting treatment.
I think what we found out in Portugal after 15 years is that using any sort of stick or any sort of threat doesn't work. If you increase the penalties for drug users, does the usage decrease? It doesn't.
The Portuguese learned that lesson in the late 1990s when enforcement was practiced as the main solution to a horrible drug crisis. The country of 10 million people had up to 100,000 addicts. That's an astounding 1% of the population that was hooked on hard drugs.
Around 400 overdoses deaths every year.
Desperate for change, the government turned to addictions treatment specialist Dr. João Goulão.
You could see a huge devastation in people. You could see people walking down like zombies.
Goulão's at the time revolutionary recommendation was to remove criminal penalties for using drugs. Portugal still doesn't sanction the sale of drugs, that's illegal, but users are not treated as criminals.
It's very important because it introduced coherence in all the system. Okay, if it stands in the idea that we are dealing with a disease like the others, with the same dignity.
Within a decade, the number of addicts in Portugal was cut in half. 90% of public money spent fighting drugs now goes towards treatment and prevention. Just 10% is spent on policing. In Canada, the most recent studies show the reverse, spending close to 70% on enforcement.
So those are like, to me, the absolute no-brainers. And
Don McPherson of Simon Fraser University's Canadian Drug Policy Coalition is one of Vancouver's best-known harm reduction advocates, and he's just back from his own survey of how Portugal practices treatment.
the profound thing about the decriminalization piece is that they sent a strong message to everybody, the public. It's politically supported that this is first and foremost a health and social issue. So it changed the way police deal with the situation. They go after traffickers. They didn't legalize trafficking. So that would help in Canada.
So to me, I always think back to that.
In Vancouver, lethal drugs like fentanyl and the 100 times more powerful carfentanil have contaminated the supply of heroin, sending the death toll soaring. So far, Portugal has been spared that. But McPherson says should those drugs turn up, the outreach and harm reduction already happening should put the Portuguese in a better position to cope. The cornerstone of Portugal's treatment and rehab model is now outreach and engagement.
We distribute to people that used to smoke.
We connected with a team as they made their daily rounds in a derelict former industrial area in East Lisbon.
Boa tarde, equipa de rua. Precisam de alguma coisa?
Ines and Marta are psychology graduates. Their job is to find homeless drug addicts.
Uma prata ou duas? Duas. É mais? Duas? Não, dá só. Duas?
They give them clean supplies so when they inject, they don't get sick. And they come to the same neighborhoods every day.
Queres os toalhetes?
Não,
Esses tens? Que as outras temos no carro.
They meet the same people, they know their stories, and they provide a very human connection to the healthcare system. We met Pedro.
I use a longer needle, and I shoot on my leg.
When we told him we were from Vancouver, that rang a bell.
In Canada, I know that I saw a documentary, and I know there's a lot of drugs on this alley on the city.
He told us he's also aware of how many Canadians are dying from drug overdoses, and he says he appreciates the people in Lisbon who are trying to keep him alive.
Their job is very important, and they are very brave. You know, they come here help people pick up the needles. They come with no security, they come alone. They're very brave, and it's very important.
They say drug war, we say no more! In Canada, harm reduction policies from safe injection sites to the Vancouver clinic that dispenses prescription heroin have been pushed by local activists and implemented against a backdrop of legal uncertainty. The result is a patchwork where Vancouver has many outreach programs, but other Canadian towns and cities have very little. In Portugal, though, help for drug addiction is as intrinsic to universal health care as hospital beds. So is treatment. This is a mobile methadone van, one of several in Lisbon that cover the city, bringing treatment to heroin addicts where they live and work.
I am Elvira. I am 50 years old. And I'm very happy with this program because it changed my life.
Elvira Ferreira showed up while we were there.
Today I'm cleaning. I work cleaning. Sometimes I'm near this one. Sometimes I'm near another one. I go there. So it's easy to get the methadone.
Methadone is a commonly prescribed substitute for heroin. It eases withdrawal symptoms without causing the high.
Well, I feel okay. I feel okay. I do my life normally. I clean my house, I take care of my grandchildren, I work. I'm okay. I don't need to go to buy the drugs anymore.
Methadone treatment is practiced widely, including in Canada. But what's striking is the effort the Portuguese system puts into getting it to people and taking the stigma out of using it. Despite the success stories, though, it's also evident that Portugal's system is being strained. For example, there are fewer spaces for recovering addicts in this art therapy program. Europe's financial crisis took a heavy toll here. People lost jobs, alcoholism and addictions increased, and funding for programs was cut. Here at the Typist Clinic, a staff of 165 was reduced to 63. The government here used to spend generously, helping addicts make the final transition from rehab to jobs and supporting themselves. But much of that money was cut. This flower greenhouse, about an hour outside Lisbon, received grants to employ recovering addicts.
Não voltar às drogas.
Such as João Grosso. He's one of 5 workers here, but there used to be 13. He says the program provides valuable work experience and references.
E comecei por fazer tratamento aqui na Dia Nova de 1 ano, 12 meses. E pronto, com a ajuda da equipa consegui refazer a minha vida e começar a procurar trabalho quando acabei o programa.
And we are still suffering from those cuts.
Manager Rui Martins fears Portugal's success story could be at risk.
We know that only treating people is not enough. If you don't provide them the skills, the job opportunity, housing possibilities, the demotivation that comes after the treatment because of not having those security facilities and environments might lead them again to start using.
Financial and mostly the social crisis had some impacts in the situation.
João Goulão laments that the drug treatment system he helped create is under such strain. Nonetheless, he says it does prove that treating drug use like a health problem is the only way forward.
You have our experience, okay? It worked.
E agora vamos tentar bater com a bola uma vez no chão.
There is still lots of drug use in Portugal, but not as much misery and not the death. Instead, there's now understanding that progressive public policy can turn around a disaster. Chris Brown, CBC News in Lisbon.
Up next, we show you the interrogation of captured ISIS fighters, and we ask two of them why they ever joined. Time to look at the day's business numbers. The TSX dropped 69 points. The dollar fell more than half of a cent. In New York, the Dow lost 118 points, and the price of oil closed down $2 a barrel.
But for another category of goods that has transformed our world, the gadgets or the tools of the electronic media. Here are some film projectors, the movies. I wonder what it really means, though, to be able to flick a switch and to bring in any part of the world, to see the most personal relationships of mankind acted out before us. It's so easy, isn't it? A handy, instantaneous gadget. The tape recorder. Small, portable, can go and has gone everywhere. India, just a button's push away. Space means nothing. With a record collection, neither space nor time matter. We can, all of us, share in everything from anywhere and any time. Well, back to box day with the flick of a wrist. Fabian, Frankie Avalon, the voice of FDR, Petrushka, the music of Arabia, the sound of a sports car race in Florida. Even the most Puritan among us engages now each and every day in an absolute Roman carnival of the senses. There are new sights, new sounds, new fabrics, new textures. Well, we're all dedicated libertines. And radio. Well, we've heard the sound of symphonies, of riots, and of battles, and all without leaving the living room. And now, radio goes with us to beach parties. Or to the baseball games. And each of us with our own private slice of the modern age. We're never out of touch. And television? Well, I wonder who really knows what it means to have pouring into our homes day after day the cowboys, the rock and roll singers, the statesmen, the philosophers, the whole debate of our modern world. Well, surely our sense of space, of time, of cause and effect must be changing. And our attitudes to life and love, to religion, politics, and leisure, what of them? Oh, I almost forgot. The telephone. We can afford to take it for granted because it's been around so long. Surely, though, our sense of space, of distance, the relationship of person from person no longer means what it did. And you'll notice that the image of the telephone goes with the teenager, because he's the only one completely at home using it. And he uses it all the time. That's annoying, isn't it, to be held up even 5 minutes? Must be a teenager on the other end. Well, there they are. Our new electronic media, or our new gadgets. You push a button, and the world's yours. You know how they talk about the world getting smaller? Well, it's thanks to these that it is. Everywhere is now our own neighborhood. We know what it's like to go on safari in Kenya, or to have an audience with the Pope, to order a cognac in a Paris cafe. But not only is the world getting smaller, it's becoming more available and more familiar to our minds and to our emotions. The world is now a global village.
The Iraqi Prime Minister arrived today in Mosul, where troops continue to force out ISIS fighters. These sanitized images are a far cry from what we're about to show you. A rare look at captured ISIS members, how they're interrogated, and what they have to say for themselves. Derek Stoffel has our story.
As the battle for Mosul rages on, Iraqi security forces are rounding up more men who they say are members of ISIS, including this detainee. Are you a member of ISIS? Are you a member of Daesh? Police in Mosul gave CBC News rare access to prisoners who, according to the officers, proclaimed their allegiance to the caliphate of the Islamic State.
العفو. بايعت دخلت دورة لياقة بدنية يعني وهذا ظليت مدة الدورة؟ مدة الدورة ظل الشهر.
They were captured in the eastern side of Mosul, where ISIS has been defeated. But Islamic State fighters are making their last stand just across the Tigris River in western Mosul. There are no police stations left in Mosul because ISIS simply blew them all up. So the security forces are using houses. This one behind me is a jail. Inside, we found 8 men, all accused of supporting ISIS. And they stay here for, on average, how long? Juma Ibrahim is 23. He's blindfolded, so he cannot identify the police officers guarding him. Ibrahim told us that before ISIS stormed into Mosul nearly 3 years ago, he worked in construction. He joined the militants, he says, to make money to pay for his sister's cancer treatment. Soon, Ibrahim found himself in training, in exercises similar to these in this ISIS propaganda video. They gave him a gun, an AK-47 assault rifle, and he became a police officer at a hospital south of Mosul. Ibrahim maintained that he never once harmed anyone, but recalled one day when the ISIS men senior to him saw 4 people trying to escape Mosul. Ibrahim says he now knows that supporting ISIS was wrong, and he says he should be punished.
سيدي والله ما أعرف يعني سنة سنتين شهر شهرين ما أعرف والله سيدي أثرت عليهم ونزلت راسهم يعني وأحكي لك أبوي وأمي راحوا يعني ما لهم بعد لهم قيمة دمروا.
We also met Kutaiba Salem. The 25-year-old says he was an electrician before ISIS came to Mosul. His reason for joining the militants, also to make money to help a sick relative. Are you a member of ISIS? Salem says he worked as a cook in a house where 5 ISIS fighters lived. But he's much more uncooperative, saying he didn't see anything, do anything that harmed anyone in the 2 years he was with ISIS. So the police boss steps in. Major Mezhir Sadoun accuses Salem of lying and searches for more information about his arrest. Then it gets tense. The major asks us to stop recording. Turn it off? Yeah, okay. With the camera off, the officer kicks Salem in the head and slaps him. When we start filming again, the major insults the prisoner, calling him a son of a dog. Tell the truth, he shouts. Even if they fire me, I'll kill you if you don't tell the truth. Police are accusing you of lying. They obviously think that you've done something. Will you tell us what you did during your 2.5 years with ISIS? But Salem sticks to his story. Major Sadoun says he's spent 2 decades fighting militants in Mosul. He was shot in the face by a suspected al-Qaeda operative a decade ago. Sadoun says in his experience, a lot of detainees lie to try to protect themselves.
ياهو تقلب ويقول لك انا كنت طباخ وشهرين كانهم ملقن كلهم كذابين كلهم مشاركين بغزوات لكن هم التنظيم عباره عن سلسله خيط يسموهم حلقه مرتبطه بحلقه.
The police will now interview the suspects' friends and family and try to find evidence that they supported ISIS before sending the cases to court. The advocacy group Human Rights Watch says 1,200 Iraqis have been arrested, accused of having ties to the Islamic State. It says many of the detainees are held in deplorable conditions, like what we saw inside this makeshift jail that reeked of feces and urine. It's where Juma Ibrahim had been held for a few weeks when we met him. Before our interview ended, he wanted to send a message to Canada.
يا دولة الكندا داعش يعني إجرامي أبد لا تخلون يدكم بيده عدكم وياهم صيروا يد واحدة لا مثل الموصل تبهدله.
Mosul is where ISIS found much support from locals when the militants first arrived. But now, after nearly 3 years of living under the brutality of the jihadists, dismayed residents await their liberation. And those who joined with the militants await their fate. Derek Stoffel, CBC News, Mosul.
Straight ahead, the Canadian Sports Hall of Fame gets a bit more crowded.
I'm Anna Maria Tremonti. Tomorrow on The Current, a misdiagnosis in a hospital ER can lead to tragedy. So Dalhousie researchers are analyzing errors doctors make to teach them how to catch their mistakes. That's on The Current, weekdays at 8:30 on CBC Radio 1.
Say they have never seen anything like it around the Lincoln Memorial, or for that matter, anywhere else here in the capital of the United States.
We lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time.
This park area on the Washington Mall, right underneath the Capitol Dome, has been the gathering place for many demonstrations. But none quite so strange as this collection of uniformed veterans, complete with medals and toy machine guns. The anti-war movement in this country is an ever-changing phenomenon. You never know quite what to expect next.
William H. Carroll from Atlanta, Georgia. 26 air medals and all the other stuff that goes with it.
Washington was the scene today of the largest anti-nuclear demonstration ever held in the U.S.
4, 6, 8, we don't want to radiate. 2, 4, 6, 8, we don't want to radiate.
If you're not building for the future, you're stealing from it.
They call the Supreme Court decision a tragic mistake. And on this, the 10th anniversary of legalized abortions, 26,000 marchers vowed to begin a second decade of protest.
Organizers are calling it the biggest pro-choice rally in history.
We will never give up. We will never give up. We will never give in. We will never give in.
From Capitol Hill to the Washington Monument, they formed an awesome mass of people. Not the 1.5 million the organizers claimed, but the largest ever gathering of Black Americans.
We're not here to tear down America. America is tearing itself down. We are here to rebuild the wasted cities.
This was exactly the image organizers wanted, a pageant of Americans before a national icon. Summoned by a political commentator and a champion of conservatives.
This day is a day that we can start the heart of America again.
Look around you, you're not alone. You are Americans.
The National.
The National.
Tonight.
The new inductees to Canada's Sports Hall of Fame were announced today. The 2017 class includes 3 Olympic gold medalists, triathlete Simon Whitfield, wrestler Carol Wynn, and speed skater Cindy Klassen. Pro athletes get the nod too. Stanley Cup winner Lanny McDonald and the first Canadian man to win a major tournament on the PGA Tour, Mike Weir. Indigenous lacrosse player Gaylord Paulus will be inducted posthumously. And the Edmonton Grads, who were world champions in women's basketball, round out the list of athletes. 2 doctors are also being added to the Hall of Fame. Robert Jackson, who was a founding member of Canada's Paralympic movement, and Charles Tater, an expert in sports concussions and spinal cord injuries. And that's the National for this Wednesday night. For news at any hour, you can always go to our website, cbcnews.ca. I'm Wendy Mesley. Thanks for watching.